Good evening. Can everyone hear me, or would you prefer? Yes? Okay. So, thank you for having me here tonight. This is my first Agape Latte, and it is an honor to have been asked. As some of you may know, I work in the Office of Residential Life. I've been here at BC for 5 years, and I live on campus with my husband, Bobby, who's a third-year PhD student here at BC in the theology department, and with our 2-year-old son, Matthew, who absolutely loves living on campus and adores the students, and who he likes to call the kids, which is pretty funny. So it's quite a unique experience raising a family on a college campus where my partner is a full-time student, and we have this inside view of this colorful life on campus that happens when most faculty and administrators go home for the night. So it's quite an experience. I've been very excited and nervous about coming to speak with you tonight, because when I was asked, I wondered, with the wealth of resources in our clergy and our faculty, what could I possibly offer to students about their faith journey? And then I realized, well, I could tell you about a person who doesn't have all the answers. At times feels like, I'm too busy to even nourish or give time to my prayer and spiritual life. A person who's always wondering if they're doing it wrong, and more often than not, a person who tries to control their surroundings at most times rather than surrendering in the moment. So I hope something I share with you tonight resonates with you in your own story, and it helps bring awareness to your own spiritual path that you're on. So to give you some background about my life and upbringing, I grew up the middle child of 5 in a large Catholic family on Long Island, and I went to Catholic elementary school until I went to a public high school, and my parents couldn't afford the tuition anymore at a Catholic school. But I remember being very involved in church activities. I enjoyed the biblical stories, all the traditions, the music, preparing for the sacraments, and especially the holidays. And I always considered myself Catholic, but as time went on, and I didn't really get involved. I stopped getting involved, and I wasn't as intentional about my spiritual life. And my attendance, unfortunately, started getting limited to holidays, weddings, and funerals. I knew something was missing, but I still always maintained that I believed in God. So, I didn't know what to do with that. I just kind of went about my life and said, well, I believe in God, and I almost shut that part of my life being active aside. And I started referring to myself as a non-practicing Catholic. And it's clear now that I was the one who ceased nurturing this relationship with God. Because I still had this childlike perception of this all-powerful God that was untouchable. And I started thinking about, as I got older, well, what would he care for my struggles or my joys or my issues? That seemed so small in what he was capable of doing. And my perception of traditional prayer started to seem forced and unnatural to me. So unconsciously, like I said, I started shutting him out of my life. And it took me many painful years to discover that God would be whatever I needed him to be in my life. I could have a personal relationship with God that was natural and conversational. My breaking point came in my mid-20s when it became too much of a burden to seem like I had it all together. I was an overachiever, a perfectionist, and tried to control all aspects of my life. Externally, I seemed happy, the life of the party, self-assured, confident, successful. But internally, I was self-conscious, a people pleaser, and completely exhausted from holding on to these unhealthy perceptions and unrealistic perceptions I had of myself. And I literally remember one day looking into the mirror, and I was horrified by the anguish I saw in my eyes. It really scared me and took me back, and I felt like I was looking at a shell of myself. And, at that moment I realized all I really want was inner peace and serenity in my life. And without even thinking, I looked at myself again in the mirror, and I just said, God help me. It was simple and direct. And it was clear that I couldn't do it on my own anymore, and I was just too far gone into my destructive behaviors. So at that moment, God's presence in my life was so profoundly felt. I was awed at how clear and distinct it was. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I must be in really bad shape if I'm getting a personal message, like, because it was clear. And that was the opening I needed to start pursuing this relationship with God. And it was around this time my favorite prayer came into my life by way of a friend, and it's the Serenity Prayer. I don't know if you know it, but it's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. Amen. And that really spoke to me. Since I was in search of serenity in my life and tired of always functioning off drama and stress, and plus it addressed my need to control everything, I still say it all the time. I said it as I was walking here tonight, to calm myself, to get ready for tonight. Like, I needed to turn it over because I know I can't control the outcome or how people receive me or what's going to happen. So I started becoming more comfortable with this renewed relationship with God, but it took some getting used to. While I tried to reconcile the almighty God I grew up with this more accessible divine being, I found myself talking to God about, everyday things, the mundane life questions, and especially my relationship with myself. And as my self-perceptions healed and I started to love myself, with flaws and all, I kind of said, this is my stuff, take it or leave it, and a lot of that small baggage started to fall away. I learned that God had a good sense of humor. Because when I still thought I knew better, what I needed and not what I wanted, God always showed that there was another way, and it always turned out to probably be the best way for me, even if I didn't want to admit it at that time because of that control struggle, or I didn't see it at the time because it was a different angle than I was looking at. So after this, it became clear that, this is where I wanted to go. I began to surround myself with others who were also discovering their unique spiritual paths. And I pursued this endeavor with great fervor because it became clear that the stronger my connection with God, the more gratitude I had for life, the happier I was, the calmer I was, and especially the better person I was becoming. I started to look for God in all things, all the small things, while I was walking about, while I was talking to people, whatever I could find God in, and I found him in many places. I started to smell the roses, because before I was always in a hurry, always on to that next thing. I had to achieve that next thing. I had to reach that next goal, and I started to miss out on what was truly important. I really feel like I had a difficult time being present in my life. There were periods of my life that seemed to have just washed away, and if you look at the pictures and the trophies and the things, to an outsider, I looked successful. I looked like I had it all going on. But I can't even really put myself back in that place because I was already 10 steps ahead. There was an obvious difference in me. I felt lighter, and I felt good. So at this time, I'll be honest, I still wasn't comfortable calling myself religious. Again, it didn't match up with what I had known for years, so I claimed that popular term, spiritual but not religious. And that's, I felt comfortable in that place as I was still exploring where I was going. I know there are many ways to connect with God, or what I would consider now prayer. So I approached this head on, like I did any other project I took on. I tried meditation, journaling, reading scripture, reciting well-known prayers, listening to sermons, and of course having my conversational moments with God. Meditation was hard for me for the obvious reasons. Sitting still and concentrating on one thing or nothing at all for me is pretty impossible. It would calm me down, but I, of course, resisted it. Journaling was hit or miss. I would do it if I was told to, but it never stuck as something I wanted to continue doing on my own. I always envy those people who have books and books full of journals. I have many journals that, like, the first 3 pages are started, and then, and then I moved on to the next one for the next retreat I went on. Oh, another journal, I'm going to start again, 3 pages in. Now my son has drawn all over most of them. And the same went for reading scriptures. So I started thinking, wasn't my prayer life supposed to be this gift that I can treasure? But it started to feel like work, and, it was very stressful for me, and it's been hit or miss like that for a while. So coming to BC 5 years ago was definitely not on my radar, but I truly believe God had big plans for me. My resigning from New York University before I had another job, when my husband was accepted into a master's program at Harvard, would normally have been a very scary prospect for me to jump in without any plans, underneath me. But something told me everything's going to be fine, and I really did surrender to the fact that I could not control the outcome, but everything would be all right. And a month before I left my job at NYU, an assistant director position opened here at BC. And I thought it was a good fit. I really liked what it was about. So I came and I applied, and I got the job. And it was definitely not lost on me that I got more out of the deal than just a job and a place to live. BC was special, and I knew that it would help strengthen my faith and reintroduce me into the Catholic community. I loved my time at New York University. Living in Manhattan was amazing, and I did a lot of individual spiritual searching and connecting with people and places, but there was still something missing in the work that I was doing with the institution. So I felt like that maybe this was why I was supposed to be here, to tap into that part of my life. More recently, I decided to meet with a spiritual director and to revisit my prayer life. So I felt I needed more structure, discipline, and of course, I thought I was doing something wrong. I must be doing something wrong. I don't know how to do it right. This isn't the way I see everybody else doing it. So this relationship has been such a gift and a blessing to me. And I expressed a desire to learn how to pray because I had gotten too busy in my life, and I stopped being present for my own spiritual life. And I started feeling the physical, not only the emotional ramifications, I started feeling the physical ramifications of that. And since I was looking for structure, that's how we started. He suggested certain readings, and I was to read the passage, sit in silence, meditate on it, journal, and, you know, to what had come to me, and then we would sit and discuss any observations or revelations that came to me. I did as I was told, of course, but my usual challenges arose. Finding the time to actually sit and be still and devote time to this, getting silent, very hard for me, getting my intellect out of the way, and then also my need to control the outcome. I was already trying to think what messages I would hear before I even allowed myself to sit and be present for that. So I knew these challenges going in. Over time, we discovered that wasn't working for me. You know, we discussed what happened to me organically and where I was able to be still, and, you know, when I spoke to God and what I was getting from that. And I was resisting what was right and natural for me, a prayer life that would fit in my lifestyle. I kept trying to put myself into somebody else's lifestyle as opposed to the other way around. And there was no right or wrong way to do it. As long as, you know, I was connecting to God and I was growing from it, you know, that was right. So sometimes in my prayer life, God begins the conversation. Sometimes I bring something forward. And other times, when I feel too busy, you know, and distracted, it is less obvious. But there are days when I feel stretched so thin, but if I'm meeting with a student or a staff member, I really try to be present and loving while we talk, because just sending them all the love that I have while we're meeting to make that connection, to hopefully make them feel safe, I see that as prayer in action for me. And, you know, if that's all I can give at that moment, you know, I'm going to try to be there for them at that point. So when I open myself up to the life's questions, rather than struggling for answers, because my practical managerial mind always wants to move towards the answers, I find a deeper level of questions and insights and true connection to God. My spirituality becomes tangible for me in those moments. So I wanted to share something with you that I found very interesting and catchy in regards to prayer. My spiritual director gave me this article from the New York Times magazine entitled "The Right Way to Pray?" And Rabbi Mark Gelman, a Reform rabbi in a Long Island synagogue, talks about prayer and technique. And he states there are only 4 types of prayer: gimme, thanks, oops, and wow. And gimme is a request or a petition. Thanks is expressing gratitude. Oops is asking for forgiveness. And wow are prayers of praise and wonder. So I see these forms of prayer every day in my life. So I wanted to share with you some of these prayers that I may have. So for me, a gimme prayer most recently has been requesting patience. Patience with a 2-year-old who's coming into his own. And a petition for the health of my brother who's going through some medical tests. A thanks prayer, I find this the easiest form of prayer. So if I feel stuck, I just start with a gratitude list, and it's usually pretty easy to start coming up with things that you're grateful for. And recently, just walking across campus, it was for seeing the beautiful colors of the trees on campus. And, you know, even more recently, having such amazing people that I work with every day in my life. And oops prayer, well, this form of prayer for me is very humbling. I know I am flawed. I know I make mistakes. But owning that can be really tough. But once I let it go, I do really feel relief. So, for example, a time I was praying for forgiveness was when I realized that God made me in his likeness out of love, and I spent so many years loathing myself and, you know, not appreciating the gifts and what he had given me. And I just kept focusing on all my insecurities, and I couldn't see past those insecurities to see the love. So that one took some time, to be honest. I had to repeat that prayer over and over again for a very long time to finally forgive myself and feel that I got the forgiveness from God for how I treated myself for so many years in those dark days. And a wow prayer. This is my favorite. I love to be awed. I love to be awed for something dazzling. I really do. I was reminded of this just over the past few days as we transitioned my son from his crib to a toddler bed. He's very scared, and because of now he can access the room and it's big and dark, he wants me to lay on his floor and fall asleep and lay there until he falls asleep. And in the dark, like several times, every few minutes, I'll see his chubby little hand reaching out in the dark to make sure that I'm still there. And, you know, he has so much trust and faith in me as his mother that it just overwhelms me. And I am wowed by him every day. God has given me the most precious gift, and there are days I just can't comprehend it. I think God wanted to show me once again that I am precious and, you know, I deserve these gifts and not to be loathed. In 2006, I had surgery and radiation treatments to combat thyroid cancer. And after I was in remission, I was told Bobby and I can start trying to have a family. But my doctor gave me warning saying your body had been through so much. This may not happen. It may take a long time. We'll see what happens in a year. She didn't want to give me false hope, but she said go ahead and try. Well, God showed me once again I was pregnant in a matter of weeks. And it just became this amazing vessel to carry Matthew. And nothing more has wowed me since that. And he will still continue to wow me. So I'll end on that. I hope you enjoyed my story, and I would love to hear from some of you how you find prayer in your life, or I would love to answer any questions that you might have. Yes. Would you like a microphone, or? Oh, I'll probably trip on it then.
I'm sorry, I can't hear, but catching from what you heard, from what I heard, it sounds like finding your religious being and understanding your faith. It was all about, it sounded like it was a journey, and that resonated a lot with me. It sounds like a lot of things, not a lot of things, just how you sort of understood your religious faith and your relationship with God. It's all about a journey. I mean, you start off not knowing who God is, and then people tell you who God is, and then you begin to, but that's what confirmation is, that you try to develop your own relationship with God. In the beginning, it's like, okay, this is what God is, and then you get, you become confirmed with it. Since then, beyond that, it's still a developing relationship, and sometimes there's moments where it gets weak. Yep. And like it sounds like it was dark times. Like that's when you're in the dark, when you don't really realize that God is always still there. And then it's strong. It's like that's when you know the presence of God has been like it's always been there. That's when you sort of realize it for yourself. Yeah. So I don't want to go too much into my story, but it just sounded like a massive for what I went through. It's like it was really dark, and it was like, what am I supposed to do? Who's with me? I felt like really, really alone. And then I began to go to church again because I need to find something. I felt like I need to slow myself down. I was racing a lot, and I forgot myself, and I forgot my relationship with God. And as I started to go back to church and understand this again, my favorite passage came up too, which is the Lord is my light and my salvation, Psalm 27. That sort of like had me bawling into tears, and then that sort of when I sort of opened up and it sort of reconnect myself in that relationship with God. So whoever else is on their journey trying to understand their faith, there's, like I said, there's times where it's weak and there's times where it's strong, but you'll eventually get it, you'll eventually understand it, and it'll become very apparent to you. And even like a wow moment, it'll become very apparent to you.
Thank you for sharing.
how the people in your life maybe have affected your prayer life? Or the relationships that you've nurtured, or, I don't know, just, I think you mentioned that the spiritual director was one thing that kind of helped your prayer life. Have you had any relationships additionally that have helped or hindered your prayer life along the way?
Sure. Well, my husband is studying theology, and he actually was raised by a Pentecostal minister. So I think a lot of our relationship has always been this discovering, coming from two different faith backgrounds and finding that common ground, and how we definitely discuss a lot where faith comes into our marriage and our relationship, and at some points one of us is a little bit more in touch with God or our prayer than the other one, and we try to pull the other one back in, and being able to, I felt vulnerable tonight. I mean, I'm one of those people that I know some people are very comfortable discussing faith and their religion and their spirituality, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because I don't normally do it in large crowds. So for me and my husband, that's very intimate when we can discuss these things, and I can sometimes show my ignorance to some things. I feel that he's a little more versed, so he helps me with some more of the structure of some more of the prayer and the background of some of the faith things. Like I said in my story, there were definitely people who came into my life that were also on that journey. So depending on what they were trying, or even just talking about and not being embarrassed about saying, oh, I'm going to turn that over to God or not, and using God talk, again, like it's probably only in certain circles for that, but I definitely surrounded myself with people that didn't, or I would shy away from people that I knew in my life were a little bit more toxic, that would be like, oh, stop with the God talk, or oh, what'd you find religion? And almost made more of a joke of it, where I was like, no, it's more than that. It's who I am, and I'm trying to discover this. So I do find myself gravitating to more people that I either see a light in them, or I know that they're trying to live out a good life. And I ask a lot of questions, and I think coming here was right. I definitely go on retreats with students. I've gotten involved in a lot of the intersections programs. Like I said, I have a spiritual director, so in a lot of those essences it comes out that I connect with other people. Yes.
When you had your final moment, did you know it was a turning point at that moment, or did it take a few days or weeks or months or even years?
Are you talking about the wow moment when I reconnected with God? Oh, it was so profound that I felt like I read it out of a book or saw it in a movie. That's what I was like, oh my God, like, am I in that bad a shape that I had to have that clear of a message? Like, I was literally looking at myself in my eyes, and there was so much anguish there, and I just felt an immediate calm, and I've never experienced that before in my life. And it was a time in my life that I was alone. I was living in Japan. I lived in Japan for 2 years, and I felt very isolated, and I hit some of my high points there and low points. And I remember saying that, like, what if I died here? Would anyone even know or find me? I'm in the middle of the city that, one of 2 foreigners in the entire city. So I felt that vulnerable. So at that moment, things changed immediately. When I woke up that next day, there was certain things that just were, by the grace of God, removed from me, that I never went back to certain thoughts or behaviors again. It was that profound.
Because one of the things I would struggle with, and when I think about my faith, is that should we wait for a while moment? Like, I mean, obviously it's all personal, so it's different for each of us, but it's tough to hear something so profound from you on how you learn from it. And I just look at me and I'm like, okay, is that wow moment in my head, or is it maybe a little different with me? Maybe it takes a little longer, maybe it's over a period of time. So I think it just speaks to how it's so personal.
I would agree with that, because since then, I don't know if I've had as profound as a moment. I maybe look for them a little bit more, but as this gentleman was sharing, it's such a journey. Since that point, I'm not going to say that I haven't had other dark points, or I haven't, been too busy to nurture this relationship. I have. Like, it has its ups and downs. So I almost have to keep rediscovering it if I let myself lose that connection. I'm not saying it's that common that I have that. Maybe I had just hit such a low or a bottom for myself that it had to be that profound to pull me out. But I don't think it has to be that to find, the grace of God, every day. Because I feel like I had to be put back here to keep getting myself back into it again, because it's so easy to get caught up in everything else externally. Yes. Oh no.
Thanks for sharing your story. One thing that really strikes me that I'm curious about is how did your experience of prayer, how has that affected you for you struggling with cancer?
To be honest, I don't know if I was as worried as everybody else around me was. Maybe because at that point, and this is a whole other story, but the cancer came actually on the heels of brain surgery. So I found God, life was great. I hit 30 and my life fell apart, and my body fell apart. So, and I think because I survived that, and I actually got the cancer while I was here at BC, and I felt very surrounded in a supportive, loving community, that I definitely was praying for myself and for healing, but it was also more to be strong for everybody else around me that was somewhat falling apart. And I had a really close support network of people around me that I knew were praying for me, and I was talking about it, and I tried to work through it that way. But I don't know, looking back, I feel like I felt horrible, and I know I was miserable in that sense, but I also kind of had an eerily calm that I never thought this was going to get really difficult for me, until the fact when it was, we don't know if you can have a family. That was the point that I was like, oh wait, I'll take your cancer, but you're telling me I may not be able to have a family? No, I stopped there. And I did struggle at that point. But God came right back a few weeks later, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm all right. Yes?
I was wondering, I did have one of those wow moments also. And like you've had those ups and downs where you have it again, but then you also go backwards. And I was wondering just if you have any pieces of advice. I'm going to be graduating in the spring, so when I'm away from my theology classes and this nurturing campus, how when you're in the real world, you keep finding that moment, that realization?
It's tough. I mean, I definitely feel like I hope you have a very supportive network of friends and family, and sometimes it had to be something forceful that I had to put myself in the situation where I would bring up the conversation to stay connected, but it is difficult. I don't know where you're moving on from here, and I hope you're in a supportive environment, but for me sometimes I almost had to, because I'm very stubborn at times, I had to get to that place of getting too busy to pay attention that it almost became too obvious that I had to stop and listen, like I said, physically or emotionally. And I hope you don't have to get to that point, but sometimes I'm a hard person to learn. Like I have to almost hit a wall again before I say, oh, let me climb back up. And I know it's something that needs constant nurturing and constant attention to stay, in your mindset. But I don't know if anyone else has better suggestions. I would definitely not say I'm an expert, because I'm still on this journey that I do it well sometimes and other times I don't, except to make sure that you have healthy people around you that love you and support you, and that you feel comfortable being vulnerable with and sharing your innermost feelings with. And I'm very lucky to have those people around me that I can really share of myself very easily. I like to say I'm an open book. I'll turn the page for you, basically. So does anyone have any better suggestions for her, how they keep themselves grounded and in touch? I don't know if you have a faith community that you attend, services or anything. I don't at this point, so yeah. Maybe that's something to be intentional when you leave here. A list of things you need to do for yourself is know wherever you're moving, one of the first things you do is start setting up a community for yourself, or be intentional about what you're going to keep in your life. Okay. Yes?
I have a quote that kind of speaks to that I heard on a retreat. It's actually by Confucius, but it's, our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. Mm-hmm. And it kind of, I don't know, it stayed with me, and I think it reflects those ups and downs. And for type A personalities like ourselves, we want to be on this constant increase in everything, particularly in our spiritual and faith relationships, but that's not how it is. And so that quote just reminds me, the point is not to do this, the point is to get back up when you fall down.
Yeah.
This might be a difficult question to answer, but hypothetically speaking, if you had not been able to have a family, do you think it would have been more difficult to maintain that prayer?
Possibly. I mean, possibly. I mean, Matthew's the love of my life. I would like to think that I would still have a family. I mean, obviously there are other means into having a family. I don't think it would have stopped me from having a family. I definitely would have probably had to have gotten over that. I'm not going to say that I wouldn't have been depressed or heartbroken, and I would have definitely had to have had some support around that time. You know, but I definitely knew I wanted to be a mother, and I definitely knew I wanted to have a family. So I don't think I ever thought that wouldn't happen. It may have just been a little bit more difficult, and we had to think of an action plan. But I maybe would have felt broken, like my body at that point. I had been through so much, and you know, and then that was the one thing I had hoped my body can do. And that's what was so amazing about it, that it turned around after being through so many surgeries. I felt like a rag doll and carried my son, who is 8 pounds, 10 ounces. So by all means, he was very healthy and then some. And if you see him now, like people think he's like 3 or 4, and he just turned 2. So, you know, I mean, that's where my path has gone. But I have friends in that situation right now, and I know it's heartbreaking. But would my faith have dropped? Maybe. You know, I hope that I would pick it back up in another way, but it might have. I would have had a hard time reconciling, well, this is the way it was supposed to be. You know, because I had my plans. I have my plans. I have my control how I want things. So, yeah.
I think the same way. Like, I've got this plan in my head of like what I want to do, but I always think like, is it going to be harder for me when these things don't turn out the way I want them to? So.
You know, and that wasn't the plan, but there are times where I definitely felt I wanted something and I was really disappointed, and it was not necessarily right away, but somewhere down the line I was like, oh, thank God I dodged that bullet. And it was then that aha moment later on, you know, that immediate reaction isn't always there, and to see the bigger picture. So maybe I was supposed to be a mother then to somebody who didn't have a family or something, so I have to think that that would have maybe come true then. Yeah. Yes?
After realizing that you need to make a change in your life in some way, how did you go about prioritizing what was important to you? Like, did you do that through prayer or?
A change at what point are you referring to?
Like your wow moment, like when you realized, like.
Well, to be honest, it had to level off, because like when I said I went to it with fervor, I probably OD'd on it. Like I tried, you know, I was in Japan, so I tried meditation and Raj Yogi, and I went to spiritual meetings, and I met with people, and, you know, and I probably, to find like, well, what works for me, that kind of thing, because I'm a bit of a project-oriented person, and you can't really go about your faith in a project-oriented way. So I think for me, that really started becoming my focus, and I tried to do everything and anything I could, and then it had to level off. You just can't function that way. You have to get on with life, you have to work, you have to have relationships. So it then, and sort of like it did now with my prayer life, I had to kind of sort of settle into, okay, what organically really works in my life? What am I not working so hard at that naturally fits my lifestyle, I feel comfortable with? And it had to be that. But it was a priority for a while. And like I said, you know, at times it goes to the back of the list of people who need my attention. And I've got to always remember to kind of bring it up side by side with me, because I am a better, you know, mother, wife, supervisor, friend, you know, whatever, if I am clearer and I am calmer and I feel more connected to God that way. So it's hard, though, always keeping it right there, because it has to be in your consciousness, you know. Yes?
What struck me about a lot of your you talked a lot about how you had a period of like self-loathing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that was, you know, what context that was in, if that was something that you struggled with during your college years, because I think that's something that a lot of students grapple with here.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you even see that at BC, even if students don't come to you specifically with that.
Absolutely. I would say the core of it was probably my college years, maybe the end of high school, but I don't know if I really noticed it as much in high school. It definitely was my college years. There was a few key things that were going on with my family that kind of set it off a little bit. I definitely was your typical middle child, taking care of everyone. My parents' marriage after 26 years was starting to fall apart. You know, I had some siblings that were struggling with some things, and I had to be I felt like I had to be the one to save them all, and I took on so much, and then it carried over into my friendships of always needing to be the friend that can keep it all together, the responsible one, you know, the leader and everything, have it all together. I could have 3 jobs, put myself through school, be the best friend to everybody, show that I could be successful, be the best student, and I put all these unattainable goals on myself. And then that's not even to talk about the whole aesthetics of how I looked, and was I attractive to someone else, and what looked right, you know, what was healthy and looked right in that college setting, and did I fit that mold, and dealing with those insecurities. So I really took the weight of the world on my shoulders, thinking I had to do it all with a smile. And I think actually more recently there's been some articles about at Duke they had a phrase for it, and I forgot what it was, but that the women had to show that they could do it all with ease, but inside, like, you were really pained, and nobody really knew, and I don't know why I didn't share with a lot of my friends. I just really had to act like I had it all together, and I think in grad school it became a little more obvious, and I'm this helper, this person that's helping shape, you know, college students when I was in grad school and everything, but all myself, I felt like I couldn't show this weakness because they thought I was so strong, and it really took me to remove myself from the situation to kind of hit my bottom and feel like I was doing too much. And I do see it here. And I think there's especially women, a lot of women that are so self-critical and hard on themselves and don't see themselves as lovable, or if they don't have it all together and make it look like at ease and be the right weight and the right height and look the right way. And yeah, they were really painful times. They were really painful times. Yes?
Thanks, Catherine Mary, for sharing. I have a question for you. In light of your experiences through your own roller coaster of your faith life, how would you say that you could help friends and other relationships with people that you have to help them in their journey as they progress and hopefully do not stray too far from the path, even though they're going through some difficult times, that they keep on walking forward, hopefully on an upward track, back to a better part of their faith life and prayer life?
Well, for one, I'm not, at this point with my friends or family, I'm not ashamed to share my story. And I think if people can connect that they're not alone in a lot of ways, like if I feel that it would be helpful, and definitely not preaching, but if I share with somebody that's telling me something they're struggling with, and they have okay, I told one person I'm not alone. So that's one way that I try to be there for people in my life. Another is that, you know, I'm very vocal about my support and my love for them, that they're not alone, that they can trust me, and what they share with me stays with me, and I'll help, you know, go through this with them. And then just also discussing ways that they feel loved, they feel connected, because it is very different from everyone. I know a lot of people that feel very comfortable reading scripture and getting something out of that, and that's where they make meaning. I can sometimes, but that's not always my best way. So really just maybe giving options, and I like to see myself as a referral person. If I can't help you with that, I will try my best to find somebody that I know just from the stories I've told or known who may have something similar, and then can maybe connect them to have a conversation. Yes?
There's a question mentioned earlier about like what to do after graduation. And
Yeah.
I've just kind of been sitting with that question since it happened, or since it was asked. So I was thinking that my mom's friends actually have a prayer group, and they're like all in their like 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, like a bunch of women who get together every like maybe month or a couple times a month, and they either are like, it's like basically like a book group or a book club, and they like do spiritual like book readings, and then they kind of like chit chat about it, or they just like kind of like here on here, they just like talk about like a topic, and like each week, and just kind of reflect on their prayer life, or like what's happened, like where's God in my life, like just like very intentional community. But it's I think like a lot of those groups you would probably find in like churches and such if you're moving to a new place, but it's definitely something that, like, for women who have long since been out of school, maybe never went to like a Boston College, Catholic University kind of deal, but it's something that's very intentional. But I'm a theology student, and I have like lots of like theology books that I read all the time. But I have like this whole separate list of books that when I have time, I want to read these books, and I think a lot of them are things I'm never gonna be able to read while I'm in school, but like I don't know, I think it'd be an interesting idea to just like make a list of like the top like 25 books that professors mentioned on the side, and I'm never going to have a chance to get to until down the road. Like when you graduate and leave and have to kind of do this whole thing on your own, having that list of like, I'm going to pick this up and in the next 3 months I'm going to finish this one book, like it's not maybe it's an interesting way to start thinking about doing that.
It's like, no, it's a great idea. Have a plan is really important, and that is such a gift that your mom and her friends do that. Wow.
Well, it's more her friends that do this. She's not as involved, but she's been talking about it so much that I think she kind of wants to join this group.
Yeah,
So.
that's nice. Anything else? No? Okay. Oh, you have a question?
Aha moment or wow moment in realizing it seemed to stand out. It stood out to me that part of that for you was realizing, as you said, self-loathing that you had been going on, and that you took a different path after that, and that being really key. Is there anything that you could identify, either little steps or little things that stayed with you that reinformed or went against self-loathing and moved you more towards loving yourself, as it were, that either you were intentional about or noticed after that moment? You touched on some of them, but more like...
When I was intentionally not trying to control the situation, when surrendering the moment and letting go of the power, and then letting whatever would happen, and then I started doing a little bit, and then bigger, knowing that, trusting that when I let go of an outcome or surrendered to it, it always worked out. And it's almost like I still kind of test myself, let me try it again, and sure enough, when I remove myself sometimes out of the picture, and I'm not saying I don't prepare myself and I don't plan and I don't do that, but when it comes down to there's nothing more you can do, you need to let it go, that has always stayed with me, that whenever I do that, I come out okay, I have a calmness, and everything works out the way I'm supposed to. I mean, where my life has ended up, I don't think I could have planned myself. The way I would have liked to say, oh yeah, I've planned out every step and I'm where I am. No way. And, you know, life only gets better and better, and I feel like when I intentionally get myself out of the way, I feel a little bit more, it's almost like me surrendering and letting go, I feel stronger. And that I get more confident and secure, and the more I let go and let God pretty much take care of stuff. And like I said, I don't do it enough sometimes because I get in the way. But the self-love took a while to really feel like, maybe it was with age and maturity, maybe it was the more I started realizing that I'm a good person and putting out more love. I felt like I got it in return, you know, threefold, and that love really started making me feel like I'm all right, you know, and I could do this, and feeling better about myself, that I was a good person, and I don't know. Yes?
You seem to think that, like, religious growth is incredibly important, but I'm just wondering, do you have any type of plans already for your son growing up and how you're going to make sure he has a religious life?
Good question, because I am in a intercultural and interfaith marriage, so that is something we talk about all the time. My husband is Puerto Rican from New York, and he was raised Pentecostal, but sees himself more as Protestant now, Presbyterian, and I am, you know, raised Caucasian Irish Catholic. So we did christen him here. So he was christened Catholic, but we talk about that all the time, and then sometimes it is a heavy conversation. I mean, and it's tough, and there's a lot going on in our life, so I feel like we keep having to put pause on it. We definitely want to raise him with a strong belief in God and love, but to an actual faith community, we're not really sure whether we expose him to both and let him choose, because in essence, my parents can't live out my faith for me. I have to do that. So I definitely think we want to raise him in a home that, you know, where God is present and there is love, but where he actually joins, we're still, I don't want to say shopping churches ourselves, but we are. Like, we're trying to figure out, are we going to be together but separate in our faiths, or are we going to find one for our family? And these are huge questions. I mean, not only were we trying to work on, you know, multicultural issues, we're raising a son who's half Puerto Rican and half, you know, white, and how to be raised and figure out where he belongs necessarily, where people want to put him in a box, check a box, are you Latino or are you Caucasian? Now we're like, what do we want to do with his faith structure? Now, granted, I think Presbyterians and Catholics aren't hugely far off. I mean, we're both Christian, and we both believe, you know, that, but it's a journey, and we're not there yet. He's 2, but, you know, we definitely, it's on our radar, and we know we keep shelving it and then coming back to it and then shelving it. So I'm not really sure. I'm hoping to raise a man that is respectful and loving, and that's all we can really hope for, you know. But thank you for your question. It was a loaded one. Wow, thanks for all your questions. Like, I'm really surprised you want to talk. Do you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I just want to know where you're from on Long Island.
I grew up in Nassau County in a town called Stewart Manor. It's only 13 blocks, so.
Okay, I'm from Manhattan.
Okay, hello. The accent comes out when I'm tired. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.